Hey now, we are getting over, and I am the Silver King, Adam Silverstein, here to lead you through these hard times. With episode 619 of your favorite professional wrestling podcast. That's right, Getting Over is back once again, and it is Thursday, so you know exactly what that means. We will be breaking down everything that happened across NXT and AEW over the last week. But not only that, there will be a bonus on today's show. We will be covering Marigold Summer Destiny and Pro Wrestling Noah Destination 2024 matches involving Io Sky, Julia, and AJ Styles from Japan last weekend. So, as is clearly the case, we have a ton to get to on today's show, and we are not going to waste another moment off the top. Allow me to remind you that the Getting Over Wrestling podcast
is all about Defy.
So please head on over to Apple Podcasts and Spotify. Leave a 5-star rating on Apple. Take a little extra time. Leave a 5-star written review. If you do, I will read it live right here on the show. And I want to thank those of you who have heard me insisting on getting some more 5-star ratings on Spotify. You guys have clearly done that. We greatly appreciate it, but you can still do it, even though I'm already appreciative. Please also remember to subscribe to us on YouTube at Getting Overcast and follow us on Twitter at Getting Overcast for episode drops, news, analysis, highlights, all of that good stuff. It is also where you can send in questions and comments for the show, or if you just want to converse with us during television shows, you can hit us up at Getting Overcast on Twitter as well. Please also remember,
I happen to love the number 5.
And I hope you do as well, because for $5 a month or $50 for the entire year, you can become an official Getting Overhead. Just visit buymeacoffee.com/gettingover. Sign up. You will get bonus audio, the fastest 5 minutes in professional wrestling, instant reactions to the major shows, and exclusive news posts on Friday. Again, that is buymeacoffee.com/gettingover. So, as mentioned, we're not just talking NXT and AEW this week. We're covering WWE in Japan, and that is, of course, ahead of WWE going to Japan for a trio of shows this coming week. So with so much already scheduled for this show, we're not going to waste any further time off the top. We're diving right into it, kicking off with NXT. We will then bridge the gap between NXT and AEW by talking about those WWE superstar matches in Japan. We'll cover AEW third. There will, as always, be timestamps in the episode description, so you can jump between one section and the other if you so choose. But as always, I hope you listen to the entire show. Now, as far as NXT goes, this was the best episode that they have put on since the build to Battleground, which was basically 6 weeks ago. But it may have been even better than some of those because they had main roster superstars involved, sexy red elements. This just had a couple TNA appearances. The best parts of the episode, though, didn't actually involve the TNA talent. I thought it was the fastest 2 hours of wrestling that I've watched in quite some time. So much happened, yet nothing dragged. Everything was entertaining. Let's get right to it. The Rascals fought Gallus. This opened the show. Both groups got brief walk and talk promos with Gallus saying they hate everything TNA. Obviously, this was high-flying athleticism against meat and strength. Just as all 6 guys were knocked down, Vic Joseph said Joe Hendry's name on commentary, and of course, he immediately appeared to a massive pop. It obviously made no real sense in the moment, but as a viewer, you couldn't help but smile. Hendry joined commentary as the Rascals took over. Zach Wentz took the old MSK push moonsault before Wesley toped all 3 heels. Then he hit a tandem elevated stomp almost into a burning hammer kind of for a relatively easy babyface win. This was interesting in that, I obviously remember MSK, and I remember having watched the Rascals back like 5 years ago or so in TNA. But while they were athletic and fun, so much of their offense was just like unnecessary flash. As a 2-man team, MSK, that would probably hit well for me, as it did in the past. As a trio, it was almost too much to a degree. And really, no offense to the other guys, my hope coming out of this is that the Rascals reunion is temporary. If the options are Wesley solo or them as a trio going forward, I'm going to take Wes solo every single time. MSK as a team, though, that would be okay. And I'm not trying to wedge drive. I'm just giving you the different options here. Fun segment. Nothing revelatory, though it was an awesome moment, I guess, seeing all three guys and having all three guys get that kind of reception that they did from the crowd. Much later in the show, we did see the Rascals talking to Nathan Frazier and Axiom. Seemed friendly, but you know what I said I wanted last week. Make it happen.
Give me what I want. Give me what I want.
After the bell of this match, Hendry got cut off while he was introducing a video package of him narrating main event highlights from last week, including dropping a playa for Teddy Long and praising himself for leading Trick Williams to the tag team win. Gallus backstage was frustrated with Joe Coffey saying Hendry's name. So yes, he appeared again. He said he's sticking around in NXT, with Coffey claiming no one actually likes him. He said Gallus and Drew McIntyre represent Scotland better than him. So Hendry told them they need to believe. Sensible follow-up to the opening segment. Makes sense that fellow Scots would have a problem with him. Gallus loosening up has legitimately helped my enjoyment of them. And this may have been their best segment yet. They've taken a bit of a self-deprecating turn, and it's working. It's wild that Hendry is as over as Trick at this juncture, given he's made all of 3 appearances in WWE, wrestled 1 match, by the way, and works for an entire different company. But the 2 biggest reactions on TV right now are Trick and Hendry when it comes to NXT. And I just love the guys' hustle to that end. Ethan Page complained to Ava backstage, saying NXT has become an unsafe working environment. Oro Mensah stormed in screaming, with Page cowering in the corner as he issued a title challenge. Ava told Oro he's not in the title picture because all he does is attack Page, so Mensah warned him that the longer he runs, the worse it's going to get. Ava decided Page would defend his title, so Ethan randomly just chose Dante Chen as an opponent, presumably thinking that he would be able to get over him easily. This was chaotic, but like in the best way. Page was on top of his sniveling heel game, and Mensah was unhinged. Ava was right in that Oro didn't deserve a title match, but it's not like Dante Chen did. I mean, he's won a match more recently, that's true. I actually think he's won 2 matches more recently. But I wouldn't say he necessarily deserves a title shot. That was the only part of this that bothered me a little bit. Would have liked Mensah put into a week or 2 of building block matches, and it does look like the first of those is going to come next week. But, I mean, the guy really does need to get some wins if he's going to go after the title. So the NXT Championship was on the line, Page against Chen. Dante cut a decent promo about being surprised he was given the opportunity, yet welcoming it, because that's why he's trained so hard in his career. Chen obviously got a near fall right at the bell. Then he got a few of them in the match, as is tradition in something like this. Page avoided a springboard attempt, booted Chen in the face, and hit Ego's Edge to retain the title. Then he shook Chen's dead hand after the bell. Mensah attacked. Page caught him with a DDT, and he stood tall. Except Oro actually respawned, and some picture-perfect kicks were laid, and then he self-counted a 1-2-3 while his body was over Ethan's. Later backstage, Page dismissed Oro's successful attack and said none of what happened bothered him, even though it, of course, clearly bothered him. So he's working the gimmick to perfection. It's exactly what it needed to be, no more, no less. Page Mensah was already obvious for Great American Bash. Now it's a certainty. I'd still, again, like to see him earn it somehow with a couple singles victories before he actually gets the title match. Cedric Alexander and Ashanti Adonis linked up in the kitchen, with Adonis getting distracted by all the fine women in NXT. He tried to pick up Lash Legend, who shut him down immediately, but he said he was actually focused on Jakara Jackson. Mensah then came in and stepped to him. Adonis had a great line. "This isn't Chase You, it's Chase Me." Loved it. Good start for Cedric and Ashanti, who, by the way, is not going with Ashanti the Adonis anymore. It's just Ashanti Adonis. Although I liked Ashanti the Adonis. I thought it was a good name. It does seem like they're going to be a tag team, just given the way they were together here. If so, they should be rocketed right to those titles by No Mercy or Halloween Havoc at the latest. Adonis and Mensah, that happens next week. The first of, again, what I hope are multiple matches for Oro. So that'll be a good first win for him, beating a main roster superstar on his way to Page. Trick was on a FaceTime with Ilya Dragunov, saying he doesn't feel like himself without the NXT title. Dragunov suggested he change his focus and go after new goals like he did since moving up to Raw. But all Williams wanted was his title back. Pete Dunne was chilling, arms crossed, watching Trick go through the shit. So Trick asked him for advice, but he just put his hand in Trick's face and told him to figure it out for himself. I honestly love the idea of Dragunov being the Apollo Creed to Trick's Rocky Balboa. It would be awesome to see that continue throughout his entire career. My hope with Dunne and the interaction there was that Pete would beat him if they actually have a singles match, especially given his NXT pedigree and singles push on the main roster. And also, I would just kind of love it if Trick got taken down a peg or two, suffer a couple losses, and then have to build himself back up. That's really what his character needs right now because he's had so much success and had it in such short order. Roxanne Perez was set to hit the ring when Thea Hale found out, got excited, and started erratically following her backstage before being held. In the ring, Perez talked about defending her title successfully against Lola Vice and deserving her flowers, only to see Lola get an ovation after the loss. She said she's not competing with the NXT locker room, but with history books. And if people think she's impressive now, imagine what her career is going to look like in 5 years. Roxy pointed out that she's ahead of the pace set by Charlotte Flair, Asuka, Bayley, and Rhea Ripley, yet all the talk has been about Julia and Stephanie Vaquer, even though neither compares to her. She wants all the smoke, apparently. Perez revealed that Hale is indeed her next opponent, which led Thea out, saying she used to look up to Roxy, but now feels disrespected, even though she's taken down all her doubters. Perez told Hale she's not ready, saying the title is for big girls, and they brawled with submission counters until Hale put Perez in the Kimura lock, with Ridge Holland breaking it up and holding her back from a further attack. Ridge later told Thea that he stopped her because if she broke Roxy's arm, there would have been no title match for her to have. There are some who complain about Roxy's heel run due to her voice, but the idea of her being a young woman this overconfident and full of herself, it actually works for me. Both of them did quite well on the mic. I believe this was the first mention of Julia outside of her ringside appearance at NXT Stand and Deliver in Philadelphia. That's important because it means she's now actually on her way sooner than later, probably in August, leading into No Mercy, if I had to guess. She might even wrestle during the WWE tour in Japan coming up next week. They have not announced that yet, but she'll be there. It's certainly possible. Hale has done enough, definitely, to earn a title shot on TV. And I'm actually looking forward to this match because we'll know right away whether her game has truly leveled up over the last year. Beyond her delivery, Perez's content was on point in this promo. It was way better, eons better, than her confrontation with Lola Vice, which again, people thought it was both of them that had problems there. It was mostly Vice that was at fault. This was just an extremely well-executed segment from top to bottom. Both of them benefited from the interaction. And I'll tell you one strange thing that stuck out to me here. And I hope our female listeners can confirm that I'm right. Thea's extensions were not blended with her hair. And it not only looked terrible, but it was super distracting. I've never noticed something like that from a women's wrestler before. That's how odd it was to me. Anyway, best I can tell, Roxanne versus Thea is going to be the youngest major title match in WWE history. Average age of 21, combined age of 42. The research is basically impossible, but from what I've been looking at in terms of other nationally televised promotions, it may be the youngest such title match in American professional wrestling history, which is wild. I'm talking about for promotions that have aired nationally on television, and I'm talking about the major titles. So this is a super unique match, and I did laugh when Roxy told her the title was for big girls when she's 2 years older than her, and they're both in their early 20s. But I'm excited for it, and I think it's going to be, I don't know that it's going to draw huge ratings for Great American Bash, but I think a lot of people who watch NXT are really similarly excited for it. The North American Championship was on the line. Oba Femi defending against Duke Hudson. Andre Chase and Riley Osborne backstage put Hudson over, expressing confidence that he would bring the title back to Chase U. Hudson also got a retrospective video package showing his rise from generic wrestler to poker player in NXT 2.0 to MVP of Chase U. The faction later went all hands in for a cheer backstage before the main event.
Oh, we got two big meaty men bumping me tonight.
Hudson was hot at the bell, catching Femi with a Hurricanrana. He actually dominated the first half offensively with a jump over German suplex. Duke caught Oba in a crucifix pinning combination, but ate a chokeslam coming back. Hudson responded with a sunset flip powerbomb, but Femi murked him outside with the toss slam into the announce table before delivering the pop-up powerbomb, now called Fall from Grace, to retain his title. Great finisher name, and thank you for actually giving a finisher a name. This was a tremendous big man match.
Big meaty man slapping meat. That's what I want.
Loved the work from both guys. And this was the first time that Femi really had to bump his ass off and sell for a bigger dude. I know he was in the matches with Dijak. He didn't bump in those like he did in this one. He was awesome. Hudson as the clear aggressor, that was a welcome surprise, as he proved even more game here than I think we would have expected. All in all, a terrific main event despite an obvious winner. 3.75 stars B+, 4 slabs of beef. I could see this being rematched in a couple of years and tearing the house down if it got more time and obviously fewer or no commercials. I'm glad Hudson got this shot, though. Javon Evans fought Brooks Jensen. Footage of Jensen's multiple invasions from the last 2 months was shown before the match. Josh Briggs came out with him. Jensen wanted him gone. Briggs reminded that he was responsible for him. Evans did an awesome springboard moonsault off the bottom rope outside. Jensen was rough early, but he draped Evans over the announce table. And when he did that, he bounced his body off of it. And he made a bouncy joke, which was pretty funny. Then he hit a cool twisting leg drop off the ring apron. Evans came back with a springboard crossbody, but Jensen caught him on another springboard with a front slam. Sean Spears came out. That led Briggs to get in his face. That distracted Jensen. He hit a tope con hero from Evans, plus the double jump springboard cutter for the babyface victory. Jensen attacked Evans after the bell. Briggs pulled him off, screaming that his job is on the line. Spears watched it all happen in the shadows. Then right before NXT ended, Briggs and Jensen argued in the parking lot as the rest of the roster kind of just commiserated there. Jensen challenged him for next week, but when Briggs reminded that he beat him really bad last time they fought, Jensen demanded it be a no disqualification match. An SUV pulled up, and Brooks jumped into it, and we didn't necessarily see who was driving, but obviously it was Spears. This was a fun way to end for a few reasons. One, it was the most people that have ever been in the NXT parking lot without an attack or brawl or murder scene investigation or something like that happening. Two, with everyone talking like in cliques, it almost seemed like they were in the high school pickup line, like waiting for their moms and dads to grab them. And then three, when Jensen got in the car, it was almost like his mom or dad had spun around to grab him, like not talking, not saying hi or, anything like that. I just had some flashbacks there. Jensen had a better look. The character progression alongside Briggs with Spears seemingly kind of serving as the devil on his shoulder. That's enough to feel like he had a positive outcome even before the final segment. He also sold well in the match. Javon got a necessary win to kind of start rebuilding himself a little bit, coming out of all the multiple recent losses. It just all worked really well together, especially given the parking lot conversation. Not much really beyond that. Expectation is obviously Jensen over Briggs with Spears' help, probably writing him off for the N1 tournament. He'll be competing for Pro Wrestling Noah, and then a Briggs versus Spears rematch on the back end of that. Kalani Jordan in the locker room put over Sol Ruca and promised to continue upping her game. Wendy Chu appeared behind her briefly before walking away. Lola later said she gave it her all in the title match when Fallon Henley, JC Jane, and Jasmine Nix came up talking shit about her failure. Henley twice called Vice a rookie, so she shot back that, guys, Nix is a rookie too.
Thank you!
Their only answer was that Nix is an exception to the rule. So Vice challenged one of them. Lola, by the way, has been in NXT for 2 years. Henley's been there for 3. This rookie shit makes absolutely no sense. It's terribly forced, but at least they addressed the absurdity of Nix being part of it. We had Vice against Jane. Lola dominated JC with her educated feet, caught her with a spinning back fist for the win in relatively short order. Fallon attacked out of the crowd after the bell. Lola fought them off briefly before Sol and Carmen Petrovic saved. There was a ton of confusion here. Lots of problems with this. Far too short of a match for Jane to lose. It almost felt like she's being de-pushed since returning from her broken nose. It also made no sense that Jane lost in the first place, given she easily could have had a 2-woman advantage ringside for the entire match. Henley surprising with an attack was also no surprise. They've been established as a trio. This has now happened multiple times. Most things NXT puts together either work right away or they eventually come together. This is just problematic from the top down. It's super frustrating to watch Henley and Jane get stuck in this when they should be in the upper mid-card and the main event of this women's division. It's nonsensical. Tatum Paxley fought Izzy Dame. Tatum didn't make an entrance. Instead, she hid behind the ring post during Izzy's and then slid between her legs as a surprise during Dame's ring pose. Wendy Chu came out as Dame was ahead offensively. Paxley capitalized, but Dame really struggled selling for her. Tatum dodged her into the ring post and then hit her finisher, named the Psycho Trap, for the win. It's a flip-over driver holding 2 of an opponent's extremities. Looked pretty cool. Paxley then approached Chu and put the head back on the doll that she decapitated last week before they smiled at each other. Unfortunately, the match was terrible. It was great to see Tatum get time and a win, though. Jordan walked up to Paxley backstage, told her she's too old to be playing with dolls, so she dropped the blonde one that she was carrying and instead picked up a black doll with frizzy hair that looks exactly like Kalani, presumably meaning she's now going after her title. I still believe it's going to be Jada Parker taking it off Lani, but I wouldn't hate it if it was Tatum. The OC fought out the mud. This was a 6-person mixed tag team match. Parker hit the rear drop and did a LeBron James celebration. Bronco Nima hit a great one-armed Uranagi of Luke Gallows. Carl Anderson caught Lucian Price with a flying neckbreaker, and then they did a tandem neckbreaker. Then he hit his perfect spinebuster on Nima. Michin caught Price with Eat Defeat. Gallows took him out with a roundhouse kick, and the Good Brothers delivered Magic Killer for the win. This was better than expected. I love that Michin started the finishing sequence on a dude, and it was nice to see the OC get a notable win as a group. It might actually be their first such win together since forming. Everyone worked well here, which was obviously important for OTM, and there doesn't seem to be an end to this. It seems like there's still meat on the bone, so give me that Michin, Jada Parker rematch.
Give me what I want. Give me what I want.
Same drop, twice in one show. Charlie Dempsey interrupted a D'Angelo family poker game, motioning for Tony D'Angelo's attention. He busted balls about the trunk elimination before Dempsey asked for advice on how to handle a witness, a female witness. Tony D first suggested taking the person out, but he had no desire to engage given it was a woman. This was perfectly executed from these two. Obviously, Charlie was referring to Ren Sinclair, who caught No Quarter Catch Crew taking out Damon Kemp last week. I was hoping this would lead to her getting involved with them because she's been massively underutilized since debuting, and there are plenty of spots for her to move up in this women's division. Well, Ren confronted them later, saying she wants to be in the group, or else she'll tell everyone, including his dad, William Regal, what happened. The guys were all hesitant, but she started trying to catch wrestle and shoot with Miles Bourne and promised to wrestle her way into their hearts and into the group. Ren literally got to show more personality here than in her entire run up until this point. She was a total natural and a spark of energy, already working well comedically with the three guys. This was similar to her character on The Independents, where she thrived before WWE snatched her up. She is going to be a main roster superstar in WWE at some point. Remember, I said it. Anyway, I'm glad this is happening. This obviously remains corny, but sometimes it really hits, and this is one of those weeks where it really hit. I forgot if I've mentioned this before, but in addition to Briggs doing the N1, Tavian Heights from No Quarter will also be in that tournament. Plus, Dempsey, Julius Creed, and Shayna Baszler will all be part of Bloodsport coming up. So just keep that in your head. Lexis King jumped on the ones and twos, interrupting an Eddie Thorpe DJ gig. They briefly brawled, leading to a match set for next week. It seemed so fake with close-ups to hide that it was probably in the Performance Center or something like that. I don't like what they're doing with this storyline. I like both wrestlers, but it's just not coming together for me. I just hope it's completely over next week. And even if they keep the DJ thing, like the part of the gimmick, that's okay. I don't want to see him actually DJing, if that makes sense. So that wraps up NXT this week. And as you can tell, there really were not a lot of down moments. That's why I'm telling you, it was the best episode since Battleground, and maybe even multiple weeks before that as well. It was a fast 2 hours, and I just continue to reiterate that NXT is the easiest and, you could argue, the most fun watch when it comes to national wrestling shows on television. So before we get to AEW, let's discuss those 3 matches that happened in Japan over the weekend. First was the Marigold Summer Destiny show. There were 2 matches on this involving WWE talent. The first was Io Sky against Utami Hayashishida. The story here is not only that this is a legitimate dream match for Joshi fans, but they were both former leaders of the Queen's Quest faction. So this was to determine the Queen of Queens. Io hit a springboard missile dropkick, 619 shotgun dropkick off the top rope, and moonsault outside in succession, plus an avalanche poison rana. Utami did a really cool swinging sleeper and a heavy German suplex bridge. Io countered a spinning razor's edge into a hurricanrana. Utami stopped Io's moonsault and hit an avalanche German suplex bridge. Utami came back with her spinning razor's edge for a false finish, and then Io responded with a tombstone pile driver and over the moonsault to win in about 23 minutes. Io was at her best here. This was a clear reminder that she is the absolute best in the world, and she really needs to be booked that way in WWE. Turn her babyface if necessary, but she should not have a long title reign solely due to a briefcase and cheating. I'm not suggesting she needs to be booked like Asuka was in NXT, but Io should absolutely get a dominant run where she can flash her skill the way she did in this match. Utami is better than most women's wrestlers in WWE, but there is plenty of major talent that can keep up with Io. As far as this match goes, it was awesome with Plenty of moments worth seeking out if you get the chance. The only issue was Io being dominant to the point that she probably got 75% of the offense. It wasn't until the final 5 minutes where Tommy looked like she was her equal. This was on par, I would say, with Io versus Bayley at WrestleMania. Less drama, better wrestling. Definitely one of the top women's matches of the entire year. I'm at 4.5 stars and an A. Sarray fought Julia. This was for the vacant Marigold World title, and it was to crown the first ever champion. Obviously, Sarray's WWE tenure did not go well, and Julia is on her way there shortly after this, so that was an added element. This had a faster pace with younger talents, but it had a tough time following Io and Utami, which was the main event for the crowd. They did sick avalanche suplexes, double underhook, and fisherman's. Sarray did 2 coup de grace and a butterfly submission working the arm. Julia basically did a sick pile driver style powerbomb through a table. Recovery was a bit too quick after that. She also hit a sunset flip powerbomb off the ropes. Sarray escaped Julia's glorious driver finisher for the second time. They each kicked out of signature suplexes at 1. Then Julia hit a glorious driver for a false finish. And Sarray again worked the arm, putting Julia in 2 arm breakers and ripping off the brace from her broken wrist. Julia answered with Northern Lights bomb false finish. Sarray hit like a 4th cross-armed Uranagi for a false finish, and then bent Julia's arm and wrist backwards for a referee stoppage victory to become the first Marigold champion. This was excellent both ways. Unlike the Io Utami match, it was 50-50 from an offensive standpoint with a ton of near falls that upped the drama. The finish was a little disappointing in that Julia needed to legitimately tap out for that crescendo moment. It was probably Marigold doing business with WWE to not have that happen, but it was so unnecessary on both ends. She could just lose a match. It's fine. Sarray is a top talent. There's no harm in losing to her whatsoever. And look, I don't think she's going to come back to WWE given the way her run went. But at the same time, Kairi Sane came back, so it's not impossible. This might have been an A+ range, if not for the slow start and for the finish. So the middle, though, was just a banger. Top to bottom, start to finish. 4.5 stars and an A. That's 2 for 2. The last Pro Wrestling Noah Destination 2024, AJ Styles against Naomichi Marufuji. Styles' entrance was awesome, with him back in a mask, his hair all disheveled with tons of smoke. Should 100% add that level of smoke to his WWE entrance. This was obviously far more hard-hitting than the others. Styles hit a tight suplex into the corner, then phenomenal forearm off the guardrail. Marufuji did what would have been a flip-over inverted DDT, but AJ's back was on the guardrail. Really super inventive spot. Styles came back with a Ushigoroshi and torture rack bomb, but he got blocked with knees on a springboard 450 before an excellent exchange, ending in a Pele kick. Marufuji hit the flip-over inverted DDT off the ropes, then stopped the Styles Clash. So AJ rolled him into it again, hit a powerbomb, lifted him up, hit the Styles Clash, and got the win. I actually wonder whether that was the planned finish or AJ just couldn't fully get him up the first time, but it made for an even better finish than a simple Styles Clash would have been. So if that was improvised, then awesome job by them. Either way, though, this was an absolute
banger.
And yes, I was at 4.5 stars and an A for this as well. All 3 matches were simply excellent. I can't remember, outside of back in the day, some of the, New Japan, Wrestle Kingdom shows or G1 shows, where I went so far and tried so hard to find matches, watched them, and they all lived up to not necessarily expectation, but they all made my time valuable, proved my time to be valuable that I went out and did that. And all 3 of these absolutely hit. So if you have the opportunity, go out and watch them. Let's move over to AEW. And now that I'm taping, ratings have come in for Dynamite. So we will discuss that at the end of the AEW breakdown on this show. Rampage was, again, awful, completely worthless. Collision had the crowd almost completely blacked out. It was mostly silent throughout that show. Also not good. As far as Dynamite 250 on Wednesday, they ended up distributing about 3,000 tickets, but it was a 700 ticket increase in the 48 hours prior to the show. Meaning, more likely than anything else, the crowd was maybe partially papered to a degree, and certainly some fans bought tickets. Fans in attendance does not determine show quality, but the venue capacity was 18,000. So they filled 17% of the venue and maybe sold, let's say 14 to 15% of it. That's concerning no matter how you slice it. It did not affect the quality of Dynamite booking, but it did affect how the moments on the show Wednesday were delivered to the audience at home. Wednesday's show was largely built around crowd pops, but almost all of them fell flat of what they could have been and should have been due to lack of crowd. As I said last week, I have absolutely no idea why the show was in Little Rock, Arkansas, knowing it was going to be the 250th episode and they were going to go all out. Even if some of this booking was reactionary, like to help with ratings, it was always going to be the 250th episode. In terms of matches with legitimate storylines this week, Dynamite went 2 for 3, giving half credit to 2 of the matches. In total, 5 of 15 fit that billing, 33%. Not bad compared to some weeks in AEW, still far below that 50% goal that we want them to hit. And 2 of those 5 matches across, let's not forget, 5 hours of television, they involved Shane Taylor Promotions. So really, how great is that, right? Let's go ahead and break down everything that happened across these shows. On Dynamite, the International Championship was on the line. Will Ospreay defending against MJF. Now, this opened the show with MJF doing more heel crowd work and ring work. Ospreay basically hit a phenomenal forearm handspring tope, standing shooting star press, and sky twister. MJF came back with one pile driver and a figure 4 leg lock, twice reversed, with Will overselling the knee and then MJF focusing on it. He avoided an Oz cutter off the ring post on the apron, with Ospreay then selling his shoulder. Except after commercial, Will only sold the shoulder for the duration of the match. He ran and jumped just fine, but the knee hurt him so bad. He was grimacing and limping and couldn't jump and couldn't run, couldn't do anything. Ospreay hit a spinning torture rack bomb. MJF tried leaving through the crowd, so Will had a little girl bump him in the chest, which was kind of cute. MJF gave her the finger and then threw a beer or a drink in Will's face, so Ospreay put his head in a garbage can. And at this juncture, I'm feeling like Jim Halpert.
What is going on?
MJF ate a poison rana back inside and kicked Ospreay in the face as he did a handstand on the second rope for no reason. Then he added Long Island Sunrise for a near fall. They were sweating like banshees as if they were wrestling outdoors or something. Will then hit Oz cutter off the barricade and reversed Crossroads inside. MJF did an eye poke and a draping arm stomp plus a really nice cradle DDT. Ospreay then hit Styles Clash on the apron, with MJF coming back with a tombstone pile driver. During the second commercial, the trainer faked pulling Ospreay's shoulder back into the socket as if it was dislocated, except the tug was so light that it was obvious bullshit. As MJF bragged ringside, Ospreay caught him through the ropes with a hidden blade and then added another phenomenal forearm inside and a Styles Clash off the second rope. So if you're counting now, 4 AJ Styles moves. But Max easily grabbed the bottom rope. MJF came back with Heat Seeker on the apron, except Ospreay's head didn't come 6 inches, probably, from hitting. Then he put Will on a table way too close to the barricade for an elbow drop off the top rope. Tony Schiavone told us it was the best match in Dynamite history. MJF landed on his feet on an attempted poison rana off the ropes, then humped his face before Ospreay flipped out of a regular Hurricane Rana. Business finally picked up here. MJF caught an Oz cutter with a kick. Ospreay hit Stundog Millionaire, Poison Rana, and half of a Spanish Fly. Then he hit Oz cutter off the ropes and a hidden blade for a false finish. MJF spit in his face, so Will headbutted him and yelled, "Tiger Driver," as the 1-minute warning was sounded. He lifted MJF and then placed him back down. So MJF shoved him into the referee, then punched Ospreay, presumably with the Dynamite Diamond ring. We saw it a couple seconds later for the 1-2-3, with just 2 seconds left to win the title in 59 minutes and 58 seconds. Both remained sprawled out on the canvas with trainers checking on them, and they got oxygen for some reason. For the first 40 minutes, this must have been the most WWE style match that Ospreay had ever worked. And I mean like Vince McMahon era WWE. It was so antithetical to what you expect from him and even MJF usually. Then it picked up and became the match that you expect from both of them. My thoughts were so mixed by the time this was over. It was clearly dragged out time-wise, trying to pop a rating and create a story, which is okay in theory, and especially based on the finished concept and, spoiler alert, the rating it did get. But in reality, it was literally twice as long as it needed to be. If you're going to have a 60-minute match, have a 60-minute match. This was 25 minutes of a match, maybe 30, stretched to 60 minutes, which was the primary problem with it. Beyond that, Ospreay completely forgot early in the match about the knee and stopped selling it in order to sell the shoulder, the knee that he was dragging around and could not run on. Suddenly it became zero issue. Running, jumping, flipping, no problem. And you might say, okay, Silver King, you try selling 2 injuries simultaneously. You're right. It's extremely difficult to simultaneously droop your lower arm while limping on a knee and continuing to wrestle the style that Will Ospreay wrestles, which is why you don't book the match in that way. It probably should have been MJF selling an injury and Ospreay selling another injury. Instead, exchanging one for another and forgetting about the first one was straight up dumb. There were also multiple eye roll sequences because of the dragged out time and the slower pace. It was the definition of like overindulgent. And lastly, Ospreay's internal conflict over Tiger Driver. We've talked about this so many times. He's a veteran professional wrestler. We know he uses Stormbreaker out of the same setup. By the way, let me bump in here. Stormbreaker has been his finisher alongside Hidden Blade for the last 5 years. He didn't even hit the move to create an onus for considering a different one. Now, perhaps if he hit Stormbreaker and MJF kicked out, then you could argue, okay, he's used his entire arsenal. Tiger Driver is all that's left, and he's conflicted over it. But instead, it was another straight up dumb babyface moment. Made even dumber because, I'll repeat, it is not his finisher, and he had not hit his finisher yet. Out of the same setup. Either use the fucking move or don't use the move. You know what I mean? All of this is not to mention, by the way, that Bryan Danielson, the person who he injured with the move in kayfabe, and the person who now gives him conflict about executing it because he respects him so much, he was out 2 weeks. He came back, won the Owen, and he's now main eventing All In for the AEW title. So the guy who he kayfabe injured and is so worried about using it again is in the spot that Ospreay wanted to be in because he wanted to win the AEW title against Swerve Strickland the last time he chose not to use Tiger Driver. It's not like he ended his career or knocked him out of action for 6 months. So why is he so conflicted about this? It's just such a terribly dumb booking concept. And if my criticisms weren't enough, one of our listeners, Michael Reisfeld at _Feld_world wrote in, he pointed out something I missed. Ospreay was selling the shoulder over the second half of the match, right? Why didn't MJF, a really smart wrestler who goes after his opponent's weaknesses, why didn't he use one of his signature moves, the Salt of the Earth armbar submission? Why don't you try to get that move locked in, given it's his most frequent finisher, and the injury his opponent has is to his shoulder and arm? It made no sense. Now, aside from all those criticisms, okay, by the time it was over, we got some excellent wrestling stuff and a quite compelling story built throughout the match, a true rarity in AEW, building a story during a match. It's going to lead, I would expect, to an obvious rematch at All In, where one is then being led to believe Ospreay will beat MJF, get the title back, get the huge United Kingdom pop for taking the strap without it being the world title, given other plans were made for that. The finish was also super creative. It utilized an old trope of an injured referee missing a weapon, but it freshened it up with a ticking clock. I thought Ospreay might be saved by the bell, but he straight up lost. So that was a really nice swerve away from expectation. Then again, longtime listeners know I absolutely loathe the diamond ring because there is no world in which something that size with a simple punch to the forehead or the crown of the head should lead to a knockout. We're not talking about a wind-up punch with brass knuckles to the jaw, for example. I hate the diamond ring gimmick and how MJF wins with it. That's why I'm so conflicted about this match. A lot of it I liked and enjoyed. A lot of it I didn't, and some of it I frankly hated. I recognize the high quality of the work. I'm disappointed in much of how it transpired. And the oxygen masks at the end was so overdone. Why did they need oxygen? They barely moved for half of the match. And it also was a true slog to get through. If you're putting on a 60-minute match, basically an Iron Man match, you need to keep the audience engaged better than this. This absolutely needs to be compared apples to apples to Bryan Danielson and Hangman Page, and also to similar matches like this. And if you make those comparisons, then as far as I'm concerned, it doesn't hold a candle to those, despite whatever flips Ospreay might do and whatever false finishes they can create. So you may be surprised, or you may think I'm exaggerating or overgrading it. I'm at 4 stars, A-. Not the best TV match ever. Not the best Dynamite match ever. Not the best TV match this year. Not the best Dynamite match this year. But was it good and super entertaining? Absolutely. By the way, I do take a little responsibility for the match time here. It was a pure monkey's paw type deal because I complained about the short matches on Raw and how I wanted more wrestling this week. So they gave me 60 minutes on Dynamite to open the show. F me, I guess, On Dynamite, the Acclaimed backstage told Mark Briscoe they want to join him in Blood and Guts because they hate the Elite. They've already beaten them once. Briscoe accepted them. Then he brought in Swerve Strickland to confirm that everyone was on the same page. He only wanted to confirm that they were ready to get violent, which they were. So Briscoe went nuts with excitement. We knew this was coming, obviously, but putting Acclaimed in this match is such an odd fit. I was going to assume here that Darby Allin will take the last spot for chaos reasons, and also the fact that he already returned and they gave it away, right? The Elite later cut a promo saying they beat the faces so bad that Swerve would have to vacate his AEW title. Mercedes Moné walked by thanking them for banning Britt Baker from the building for the match. Then Kazuchika Okada asked Mercedes to do her dance, and then he had to wipe sweat from his face after watching her. Shitty promo, terrible acting. Pretty funny from Okada. But for people who whined about Dominic Mysterio getting a text message, are they going to complain about EVPs of a company making a woman dance sexually for them? Or no, because it's AEW. Even later, Jack Perry cut a promo laughing that Darby attacked Brandon Cutler last week, saying he doesn't give a shit about Cutler. So we saw Brandon already laid out, and Jack continued beating on him. I enjoyed the concept of this, but they're trying to paint Perry as a badass, and he's the antithesis of that. It's tough to believe, really, in anything he says or does at this juncture. So we had Swerve against Okada. This was the main event, champion versus champion, not title versus title. Both guys did their normal match opening stuff. Swerve had a Matrix-style avoidance. That was cool. Okada hit the tombstone. Swerve kind of countered a Rainmaker with a stomp, only for the Young Bucks to blatantly interfere for a disqualification. Acclaim saved. Perry and Briscoe were out next. Swerve caught Jack with house call. Then Hangman Page entered with Swerve standing alone in the ring, except Okada pulled him out into the crowd, and everyone was separated. Then Darby's music hit, with him descending from the rafters like Sting, and another brawl ended the show. There's obviously nothing to say about the match itself. The brawling and such was all fine. We've seen it a million times across every company that's ever existed. Darby sliding down from the ceiling was a nice touch, but him joining Team AEW, it was always expected. And I don't understand why they gave it away. Why would you have him come back and do those backstage segments, the attack on Brandon Cutler, when you could have just not done that and had him descend from the rafters as the savior for Team AEW here? That moment would have hit so much better if it was a surprise. So that doesn't make any sense to me. Now, here's my confusion. Another team that originally said it was going to be in this match returned to TV on Saturday before the Acclaimed was announced for this match. Yet Acclaimed is still in the match. AEW also had a chance to potentially debut Ricochet here. They chose not to do that. That's okay, but it would have been a pretty cool surprise. It's just an extremely weak team outside of Swerve and Darby. I mean, having Acclaimed in those spots doesn't really do much. Briscoe, sure, he's the ROH champion. Sure, people like him. He's going to do some crazy shit. So that's why it's okay with Swerve and Darby. But it's like, is he a star? Not really. So I have to believe the faces don't really have that much of a legitimate chance of winning. Really, the only question is how close to death Darby's going to come in this match. And we'll find out next week. On Dynamite, Mariah May entered dressed as the timeless version of Toni Storm, all done up the same way. May delayed talking, so Tony Schiavone on commentary said, "Speak, bitch." I don't give a shit about the context. I saw people loving this. It's atrocious for him to do that. May said Storm was so desperate for the spotlight, it obfuscated her vision of what was happening around her. Mariah said that she had fun stringing Tony along and wanted to see how far it would go, so she decided to embarrass her in front of as many people as possible at Wembley Stadium, saying last week was Tony's greatest performance. The expectation was that Mariah would get booed out of the building with immense heat, but there were so few people there that she barely got audible boos for, I'd say, 95% of the promo. There was a brief chant late, but that's it. Oh, also, she ended the promo with All About Mariah, confirming for those who didn't already know, the entire thing was a redo of the movie All About Eve. I thought this was massively disappointing, really, from the moment that she started talking until the end of the segment. I liked that she came out as the timeless version of Toni Storm because she was dressing like her for so long. But, I expected a stronger follow-up given it was so hot last week, and we just didn't really get one. On Collision, Bang Bang Scissor Gang, sans Jay White, beat 3 jobbers in 2 minutes. Commentary clarified it was not for the trios titles because Juice Robinson is not allowed to defend them, even though he was carrying them. As if a match against jobbers would have been for the trios titles. The heels explained that White was injured by the patriarchy, which makes Robinson officially a defending champion because there's no other option. So Christopher Daniels interrupted, saying no substitutes are allowed when a member of a title team gets injured. So because of that, he's stripping them of the championships. Patriarchy interrupted, with Christian Cage wanting to be gifted the titles. CD refused, but he decided to put the vacant titles on the line between the Patriarchy and the guys he just took the titles from. Holy idiotic booking, Batman. Let's take the last part first. Why the fuck would you strip the titles from a team and immediately allow them to contend for the exact same titles? All that would remove is the chance of retention via countout or disqualification, which never happens in AEW anyway. I should say rarely, given we just talked about a DQ. So that was completely nonsensical. You could have just booked the match and said, if you want to be champion, you need to defend the title immediately, and it's going to be in a no DQ match. But then you get into the whole aspect of AEW being about respecting wrestling history, but for no good reason, choosing not to accept the Freebird rule, first on its face, and then again in a situation where someone is injured. Let's not forget, by the way, MJF was allowed to defend the ROH tag team titles with a replacement for Adam Cole. And there have been other cases in AEW of stand-ins for title defenses. So that's okay. But you can't let someone who's part of an established faction defend the titles and be the champion while that person is injured. It was stupid on the face, even stupider when you break it apart and try to find the logic. Again, just tell Bang Bang Gang, look, we don't really do that here, but you have a choice. You can vacate the titles straight up, or you can fight Patriarchy in a no DQ match next week, and Juice can earn himself the right to carry the straps. And by the way, now that they're unified and vacated, are we finally going to go back to one set of titles being carried? Or are they still going to be 9 straps lugged around, even though the pink ones are the exact same as the black ones?
Off is a direction you can fuck.
Hated this shit. On Dynamite, we saw backstage footage from Collision of Bang Bang Gang still carrying the titles, refusing to acknowledge that they were stripped from them. CD came in saying he's not happy about the decision either, and it's not fair. What the fuck? He made the decision. He never said it was Tony Khan's decision. He came out and decided they were stripped for the reason mentioned before. And even if he wanted to put it on Tony, he's an interim EVP, remember? He shouldn't be an empty suit. Does he not have a backbone to talk to his boss and suggest he not make that decision? So then CD threatens suspension if they don't physically hand the titles over, which they ultimately did. Absolute trash logic. On Rampage, Nyla Rose beat a jobber in 2 minutes. Why did this random match suddenly happen? Because on Collision, Nyla cut a promo deciding to fight Mercedes Moné on Dynamite for the TBS title. Let me remind you that Nyla, as much as I like her, lost to Chris Statlander in the Owen and has not picked up an AEW TV singles win over a contracted talent since October 2022. Let me repeat that. October 2022, 21 months ago. Yet she gets a title match. Open challenge or not, she's only had one AEW TV singles match at all in the last 12 months. Awful shit. Her promo was okay. On Dynamite, Mercedes, Nyla for the title. Monet put on a glove with nails on it and tried to do Baker's lockjaw, except Rose just bit down on her hand, which every wrestler should do whenever someone tries a mandible claw. So she locked in the statement maker for the win. Then she ripped up a sign held by a fan in a Sting mask that was so obviously not a normal person. Of course, it was Britt, who took a shot at Mercedes before they got separated by security. Not much to say about this. The pull apart was even kind of strange, just the way it happened. Not lost on me, by the way, there were 2 Sting references in one episode of Dynamite. On Rampage, Chris Jericho, with the Learning Tree, explained that good things happen when people listen to him and bad things happen when they don't. Then he offered advice for Samoa Joe's recovery, promising that more lessons would be learned during a new TV time segment on Dynamite. That segment had Jericho gloating about basically being on every Dynamite and promising to keep that streak until episode 500. Minoru Suzuki interrupted, handing them a contract for an FTW title match with the other guys banned from ringside. Then he headbutted Jericho, and the heels just let him stand there gloating about it. They didn't attack him. Why the hell not? Why would you not attack a guy who just attacked your boss? On Collision, Konosuke Takeshita beat Tommy Billington in under 14 minutes. Presume the match happened since it was in Canada. Billington did a double counter tombstone pile driver with no cover. Then he kicked out of Blue Thunderbomb that Takeshita has used to beat opponents, contracted opponents. He ate shit on a clothesline before losing to a pump knee, now called the T-trigger. Don Callis, after the bell, propped up Billington's effort as a means of recruiting him, wanting to mentor him like Bad News Allen mentored Callis and his uncle Dynamite Kid. He shook Don's hand, then waited like 30 seconds to say, "Kiss my ass." So Callis slapped him. Takeshita attacked, with Kyle Fletcher running down to join. And then FTR returned to save and lift Billington. This is what I was talking about earlier with the return. Quality match, but it's bookings like this that are central to AEW's issues. There is no reason Takeshita should be taken this far against an unsigned talent, despite his pedigree, in a match with zero storyline relevance. It took longer for Konosuke to beat Billington than it did Penta El Zero Miedo a couple months ago for a number one contendership. Then with the FTR return, I am immensely confused. Did they not say literally 1 month ago that they would be out of action indefinitely due to an injury? Dax Harwood posted a 5-minute video to Twitter saying he owed fans an explanation. A 1-month absence does not need an explanation, and it's certainly not indefinite. Super odd. On Rampage, the Kings of the Black Throne beat the Premier Athletes in 10 minutes. Nothing else happened before or after the bell. On Collision, Malachi Black said next week, the House of Black will start building the foundation for Wembley Stadium. I presume they mean going after the trios titles, whatever. On Rampage, Roderick Strong beat a jobber in 75 seconds. Kyle O'Reilly on commentary disagreed that he's better with Strong than in the conglomeration. Then the trios started staring down each other from stage to ring. Super compelling. Not. On Collision, Strong beat Dalton Castle in 11 minutes to become number one contender for the ROH title. Roddy hit a pump knee for the 1-2-3, but there was an extremely obvious cut on the video, which means there was a botch of some kind, maybe a Castle concussion, that changed the finish. I presume this was held on AEW TV since Mark Briscoe is the champion, and they've all been kind of feuding, but it's another example of a random match involving a title that no one really cares about. Immediately after the match, Briscoe cut a promo from the ring on his farm where he literally said nothing. The key line was blood, guts, and chicken shit. Even though it was acknowledged as taped, he somehow knew Roddy won the contendership. Bush League stuff there. On Collision, the Kingdom beat O'Reilly and Orange Cassidy in about 14 minutes. Strong distracted O'Reilly as he was ready for the finish. Tomohiro Ishii pulled him down as Trent attacked Orange on the other side of the ring out of the referee's view. Kyle ate a frog splash without a tag, and then a spike pile driver. Trent argued with Kingdom for some reason with Cassidy, able to catch him from behind with a huge wrench to his back. This was only one of 3 storyline relevant matches on AEW TV over the weekend, but it was a super poor main event. On Collision, Chris Statlander explained that attacking Willow Nightingale last week came because she's petty and Stokely Hathaway is a hater, so obviously they would do that. Stoke added that Willow's positivity has not worked for her, and Chris promised it would never end. Never mind that Nightingale literally won the CMLL Women's Championship the exact same day that this aired. Even if this was taped before, you recut it or you save it for Dynamite. On Rampage, Deonna Purrazzo got a video package where she drank wine and explained that being the virtuosa is about combining the art and the physicality of wrestling. She said she likes what AEW has forced her to become because actions have consequences. A for effort, not great though. On Rampage, Thunder Rosa beat Rachel Ellering via submission in under 4 minutes. Purrazzo attacked after the bell, taking out both women with ease. Ellering is now signed to AEW after losing a 4-minute match. She's not bad, but it speaks volumes that her father's employed by WWE. She can't get a spot in NXT. And that she had a spot there and it just didn't work out. The Purrazzo-Rosa feud continuing is fine. Felt like there needs to be another element added to it, and we got that on Collision. Deonna said nothing. Thunder confronted her with an actual angle, saying she's not going to do sneak attacks. She's going to wait for the bell, and she's going to win the right way. Beat her straight up. Rosa decided that she wants to fight next week in a lumberjack match, given they will be in her home state of Texas. First lumberjack match in 2 years for AEW. Could be good. On Rampage, Shane Taylor Promotions beat Top Flight and Action Andretti in 12 minutes. This was the main event and the lone storyline relevant match on the entire show. It's exactly what you'd expect with the high-flying faces flashing. Andretti failed to lift Taylor, so he took 3 huge power moves in the head for the finish. Taylor just needs better ring gear for sure. Also, they're a group. None of them matched. Good heel aesthetic, but they got to work on it. Now get this. This match was basically run back 1 night later because on Collision, Top Flight beat Anthony Ogogo and Lee Moriarty in 12 minutes. So the same mediocre at best match with 0 additional storyline elements or even a reason for having another match given there was a definitive result. Taylor attacked after the bell, knocked out Andretti. So this is still continuing after this?
0.0.
Market 0!
On Collision, Sky Blue beat Harley Cameron in 8 minutes. Heel versus heel for no given reason. Though Sky was wearing all white and she didn't have her dark makeup, she had light blue eye makeup again. She had a crucifix drop and one with a really crappy new submission that took a while for her to set up. After commercial, she cut an awful promo saying she deserves respect. Then she challenged Hikaru Shida. That way she could prove herself. how much do you want to bet Shida wins that match? At least there's a reason for it, but why is she not dark anymore? Like, why is she wearing white? Why is she wearing blue eye makeup again? How is the character changed? I don't get it. On Collision, there was a second vignette for a masked wrestler known as Hologram, who will debut next week. This is not Ricochet, but a luchador from Mexico under a new mask and name. And lastly, on Rampage, Rey Fenix beat Angelico, AR Fox, and Commander in a random four-way match with nothing at stake. As if based on the lineup, there was any surprise who would win. The submission move over Phoenix utilized the verbal tap out. Thought that was odd. Didn't look that painful. So that wraps up AEW this week. But as mentioned, we are going to discuss ratings because an interesting number came in for Dynamite. We haven't spoken about ratings recently because it's been pretty much the same stuff for both Dynamite and NXT. But Dynamite this week dropped 795,000 viewers with a 0.27 demo. That's the highest demo since June 5th and the highest overall viewership number since April 10th. So a significant increase, especially week over week. I believe they only were at 691,000 and a 0.23. So 100,000 viewers week over week as an increase. That is notable. The question, of course, is going to be, will AEW maintain this level? They should next week, because Blood and Guts is coming, and that's going to be a major show with a huge tentpole match booked for the main event. So the hope and the expectation would be that they're in the high sevens, maybe even cross back into the low eights. But it does need to be said that, 798,000 a year ago would have been looked at as a mediocre, poor rating. Earlier this year, it would have been looked at as average. If you look at AEW's ratings, basically from January through April, they were probably averaging this number. They're actually probably averaging in the low eights. So this still isn't back to where they were at the start of the year. And certainly, just like that 502,000 number back on July 19th, this could be an outlier. I wouldn't think it is, though. I think Blood and Guts is going to do a really strong rating next week. The question becomes, what happens after that on the build to All In? And if they are able to maintain to All In, what happens after All Out? Does it completely dip off again? They don't go head-to-head with football, the NFL, so that shouldn't be an issue. Attention does change as the fall begins for wrestling. Some people stop watching it. It's going to be interesting. But for 1 week, an excellent number for Dynamite in terms of a rebound from what they've been doing pretty much since June 12th. It's been the doldrums for them. NXT, on the other hand, posted 610,000 viewers for their show on my birthday, a 0.2 demo. It was actually the highest demo since June 18th. So that was a positive that it was back up, but it did lose viewers from last week, and it still hasn't crossed that 700,000 threshold since June 18th. But being in the sixes is okay for NXT. It should be at the mid or high sixes, given what they're doing with the TNA crossover, occasionally having main roster talent. There is a clear difference when main roster talent is on that show than when it's not. And I don't mean main roster talent like the OC, or no offense to them, Cedric Alexander or Ashante Adonis. I mean like, someone notable, a Dominic Mysterio, a Becky Lynch, a Seth Rollins, whatever the case might be. And WWE cannot do that every week. And they shouldn't have to only rely on that to get into the 700s. At the same time, if you have such a large roster and only so many people are getting used on a week-over-week basis, I would think more often than not, they could have someone of a higher caliber on NXT. That way, the weeks where that isn't announced, people still tune in because they're expecting it. So maybe they should reconsider that a little bit. But again, it was the highest demo for them since June 18th. That's a positive. But it was the second lowest viewership number since May 14th. And I don't believe there was any significant competition. I'm actually completely changing my stance here. The MLB All-Star Game was head-to-head with this, so there was significant competition. We'll see if it rebounds next week. Again, I just thought it would do a better number. It was a better show, again, than they've put on since Battleground and maybe even before that. So, folks, that wraps up this edition of the Getting Over Wrestling podcast. We covered a lot. NXT, WWE in Japan, AEW, and some ratings talk here on the back end. On the way out, allow me first to hit you with a couple reminders. You gotta know that the Getting Over Wrestling podcast
is all about Defy.
So please head on over to Apple Podcasts and Spotify. Leave some 5-star ratings on Apple. Take a little extra time. Leave a 5-star written review. If you do, we will read it live right here on the show. Don't forget to subscribe to us on YouTube at Getting Overcast and follow us on Twitter. You guessed it, at Getting Overcast. For episode drops, news, analysis, highlights, all that good stuff is also where you can send in questions and comments for the show. I'll repeat it once more on Twitter at Getting Overcast. Please also remember,
I happen to love the number 5.
and I hope you do as well. For $5 a month or $50 for the entire year, you can become an official Getting Overhead. Just visit buymeacoffee.com/gettingover. Sign up. You get bonus audio, the fastest 5 minutes in professional wrestling, instant reactions to the major TV shows, and exclusive news posts on Friday. Again, that is buymeacoffee.com/gettingover. We would greatly appreciate your support. In terms of what's coming up next here, schedule-wise with the Getting Over Wrestling podcast, we will be back on Tuesday with your normal WWE show, and we will be back same bat time, same bat channel next Thursday with your NXT and AEW show. I believe the NXT edition will serve as a bit of a preview for the 2-week Great American Bash that will be happening during the Olympics, so you're not going to want to miss that. And by the way, if you have not listened to our WWE episode on Tuesday, not only do Vintage Chris Manini and the Silver King break down the week in WWE, we also sit down with Big E and Braun Breaker. So make sure you don't miss that. I appreciate all of the attention from your ear holes on this show. I hope you enjoyed this performance-enhancing audio, but it is officially time for the Silver King to sign off and leave you with just 3 final words. Bye for now.